digitalization in itself, as you nicely said, becomes our key objective. We want to create more and more digital tools. We want to bring robotics more and more in our also personal life. But then the question comes, for what?
Are Europe's foundations being tested? Insecurity, digitalization, populism, climate change, gender inequality, pandemics, mistrust. 7 disruptive elements are fundamentally challenging our social pact. This is Rethink the Deal, the official podcast from Express 2, the European Union research project dedicated to specifying a more inclusive, democratic and sustainable social contract. Join us as we explore the challenges and solutions shaping Europe's future. The EU's role as a digital regulator is making headlines these days. How do digitalization and the EU social contract influence each other? This is the core question explored in this first episode.
So welcome everyone to the first episode of the Express 2 podcast. My name is Giulia Gentile and I'm a lecturer in law at Essex Law School, as well as one of the co-PIs of Express 2. We're delighted today to welcome Kai Zenner, who is head of office and digital policy advisor to the member of the European Parliament, Axel Voss. While his main focus lies on AI and data policy, he also advocates for a value-based EU digital strategy and the adherence to good governance principle. Kai is really active in this field and he has been also fellow of practice at the TUM think tank, a member of the OECD AI network of experts and part of the World Economic Forum's AI Governance Alliance. In 2023, he was named Best Assistant in the European Parliament and ranked 13th in the Political's Power 40 class. So, and this is followed by another amazing achievement. In 2024, he received the European AI Award from EAIF, and in 2025, News listed him among the 14 movers and shakers to watch in tech policy. So we couldn't have anyone more suited and prepared to talk about the EU social contract, digital regulation, and all that comes with it. So Kai, thank you very much for being with us.
Many thanks for the invitation.
Great. So we have a lot to discuss and times are becoming really interesting, right? What was the expression, may you live in interesting times, I think has really become the reality. There is no moment where really we cannot say that something interesting is not happening. And this is really the case for digital regulation in the EU. Kai, I'm sure that you have seen all the developments happening at a really fast pace. And now we are faced with digital omnibus proposals presented on the 19th of November, 2025. And what it seems to me is that the EU approach to digital regulation has shifted, moving from stronger regulation with extraterritorial effect to less comprehensive rules and maybe a risk for under-enforcement. Do you agree? What is your preliminary assessment of these proposals?
Yeah, it's a good question for us. So for my boss, MEP Voss, and myself, it's not so easy to answer because we and many other stakeholders here from trade associations, but also think tanks like Bruegel, like SEPS, EPC, also national think tanks, were advocating for a long time for good governance approaches coming back, for making a stop in regulating the digital field, checking what is there, fixing all the overlaps and contradictions. Together with Scott Marcus, I made this overview of digital laws that is now comprehending 133 legislative proposals or already 101 adopted laws. And again, all those actors that I mentioned at the beginning, including us, were feeling this is too much. You talked already about the lack of enforcement, for example, GDPR. There are some problems in the law, I would say, but even more problems in the enforcement. And this applies to almost all of those laws that I have listed. So now finally becoming aware, in particular the Commission, that this needs to stop, that something needs to be changed is definitely a positive development. Again, something that we have advocated for many, many years. Where it becomes problematic, and this is the reason why, again, we are happy and unhappy at the same time. The Commission basically concluded from the Draghi report, so Mario Draghi's competitiveness report, which was really the final straw that pushed all EU institutions in this direction of simplification. Now the digital omnibus and all the 7 other omnibuses that were coming before is, however, it's going in a direction where it's not really about cleaning up contradictions, legal mistakes, taking time, doing a really broad review, but instead it's a lot of small fixes that are put together under huge time pressure, and time pressure was one of the reasons why this whole legislative mess has been created, because work silos were indeed working in silos and not cooperating enough. But exactly that again now happens with the omnibus. And this means that while we do support the general direction, we are quite pessimistic, or at least right now negative, when we look at the concrete proposals, because again, they twist minor things. But in particular, when it comes to the legal problems, it's not really the breakthrough. Maybe I'll stop there. We can dive deeper, but this would be my high-level response.
Thank you, Kai. I think this really sets the scene in a very wonderful way for reflecting more in general about how the EU positions itself as a digital regulator globally, but also what is the future of these rules and how they will shape European society. So these are very good points. So in a way, I understand the benefits of trying, of course, to simplify, the push towards creating more streamlined rules, and of course this is a very valuable objective. But could you please perhaps elaborate a little bit more on what do you think the EU could gain but also lose from this approach?
Yeah. No, definitely. And it's a really nice follow-up question to our first question. Because, if it's being done right, and again, something that trade associations, but even NGOs and definitely universities and think tanks were pushing for, would be something like the Commission was announcing in their digital fitness check, they called. So taking all of the laws, especially checking if there are overlaps, contradictions with sectorial laws. So think about the AI Act or the GDPR, horizontally applicable to all kind of different use cases. And of course, there are already sectorial laws. Medical device regulation is one of the most famous examples that are already doing something in this regard. So why do we have both? Why do we have definitions on, for example, substantial modification that differ? What does it mean if under a sectorial law something would be high risk or would face stricter obligations, but then in the AI Act not? Is then, in this case, medical device regulation lex specialis, and AI Act, for example, lex generalis? All those questions are completely open, and of course, good governance approach that is taking time, that is really listing all those legal issues that I now indicated, and then in a technical procedures going through one by one and always clarifying, for example, this definition should be understood in that way, or streamlining definition would make not only companies happy because there is much more legal certainty, they know exactly what to do, but also I would claim that for civil society, it would lead to much better outcome because probably finally they would get their rights better enforced, faster enforced. We just see a lot of situations where, for example, a big US company knowingly violates against, for example, a data protection law, but then they can always say, well, maybe we are violating GDPR rules, but there are at least 3 other laws that are kind of indicating what we are doing is allowed, is permissible. So those situations we could definitely cut and solve. And in the end, in this best case scenario, I think there would be positive outcomes for everyone. To the second part of your question, what are the risks of this simplification efforts? Well, if it's now being done as it looks like right now, that basically there's a huge focus on competitiveness, and without clear evidence, in particular, the Commission is now creating a lot of small amendments, thinking this will save companies a lot of money. I just give you one example. In the AI omnibus, there is a part that wants to take away the obligation of companies that would fall under high risk, but that are self-assessing that they are not high risk, that those companies do not need to register anymore. Well, first of all, it was part of the political deal, and it was one of the major points that the left side of the parliament pushed for. So even though I work on the other side, I think taking this away is unfair, is not democratic, and would lead, I think, to demands from the left side to our side that we also give up certain of our core points. This may be politically and on the content level. If you really think about what I just said, the company needs to do the self-assessment anyway. And basically, they just need to upload the result to a database. So it's one sentence, it's 2 sentences. What is the red tape there? I don't understand it. What is the cost there? It's 5 minutes, it's copy-paste. Also, to claim that by removing this part, you are saving a lot of money for companies already now is not true, because this part of the AI Act is not even applicable right now. So it's a future cost, which is minimum. And this would be my conclusion, that if now simplification is really going in this area, it will not help companies. And as you indicated in your question, there is this big risk that we are removing important principles that we have established with our digital laws. Think about privacy by design, maybe also sustainability by design, other principles like interoperability. Basically, all this push for a European way that is different from the US, from China, from other countries is basically, coming from those principles. And if we are now removing them or weakening them, it's not really smart in ways of strategic thinking, geopolitical issues, trying to get or leverage a competitive edge. We are actually doing the opposite.
Well, Kai, a lot to think about. And I think that the point that you raised also in a way about the distinctiveness of AI digital regulation is quite important, in the sense that the objectives, intentions of these measures, of course, are, as we already discussed, valuable, but then sight should not be lost of the risks of watering down what the EU stands for, and what are also the protections that make the EU probably a unique organization from the perspective of how it protects individuals in the digital environment. And I think this creates a very nice bridge to then introduce Express 2, which is the project that I've been working on with a consortium of universities, and has been thinking for the last year and a half or so about the EU social contract. So trying to, in a way, use this lens to rethink EU society and bring to the fore a more collective understanding of the EU, which is not just shaped by institution, but also from a grassroots perspective. So what is peculiar about this project is that we are using many deliberative processes with the public, trying to talk with as many stakeholders as well as the public more in general to gather insights on very complex questions around the EU and its future. And in my work package on digitization, of course, having to deal with all these transformations in the last year or so has been a real challenge, but of course very, very exciting. So trying to link the discussion that we had so far on the trajectory of the EU as a digital regulator with this idea of the social contract. Can you see perhaps any, you can say, benefits from trying to bring a more social lens perhaps to questions around digital regulation that could be understood as being part of the EU social contract?
Yeah. Basically, I think there is a strong link indeed, as you said, to what we just discussed. The Commission, the European Union, basically 2 years ago, were still pushing very much for exactly or in exactly this direction. As you know, there was this declaration of digital rights and principles, I think, where, the Commission and the two other institutions, the Council and the Parliament, agreed on a set of principles that, again, our technology, the development, but also the deployment, the use should be sustainable, that the human should be in the center, and so on and so on. It was all, let's say, with rather high level language. It was a bit blurry. You didn't always know where exactly this is heading. But I would say in total, it was indeed for what the European Union was standing, and it was also amplifying previous, let's say, documents. There was, for example, from Macron, this initiative for a future of the European Union, Future of Europe conference, I think it was being named, and their citizens and citizen ambassadors were also working on a declaration. And I need to say this digital part of this declaration was really, really good and actually very much overlapping what you now can also find in the declaration from 2 years or 3 years ago. And probably it's also very similar to the findings of your work that you are currently doing. Because I would say there is a rather common understanding set of ideas. And this brings me back again to our previous discussion point. Since we have this common mindset and common understanding what we stand for and so on, why not doubling down on it? Why not really create a brand? Also now in competitiveness reasons. So really build EU technologies and sell them also abroad to other continents, other regions, because I guess there would be a lot of interest, for example, for certain technology groups that are consuming less energy, that are protecting your privacy more, and so on and so on. I guess this would be a much smarter approach forward than just copy-pasting or trying to replicate what is being done in the Silicon Valley, what is being done in China, in whoever, Israel, Russia, whatsoever. We are right now, it's not really clear where politics is heading to. And this, again, going now to your work, is, I think, why it's so important that, let's call it, academia, but also social or society organization, civil society organization, keep pushing for this direction. Also, there are some trade associations that are saying, why should we give up what our industry is strong with? Think about open source, for example. It's
Of course.
also a field that we should push much more. But yeah, since it's really at the moment being discussed and there are pushbacks against it, I think a project like yours are very important in order to show that there is a large common understanding, that citizens feel very similar also in terms of risks, of threats to their children, to their community, if we are thinking about deep fakes, fake news, and so on and so on. And actually what I really like in your project is this very strong word of social contract. And it is, in the end,
It
I
is.
think, really the perfect narrative for it. No? Again, to what I said, if we have a strong social contract that includes a common digital understanding, this competitive edge that I was talking about that we could leverage would be much easier to leverage in comparison to now, where we don't really know what we are fighting for, what we are doing, what certain policies should actually look like, because this underlying vision or groundwork is opaque. I can just say I'm really looking forward to the.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kai. I mean, this is really encouraging in a way. And I think that with these reports and more broadly the project, we're really trying to shed light on this more collective understanding of the EU, but also in a way, the very fears that there might exist in the EU at the granular level. We're talking about inhabitants of the EU, and also going beyond the EU, the neighboring countries, how they perceive the EU, and
Indeed.
what the EU can do in a way to further strengthen these collective understandings and meanings that are hidden in society, but have been shaping the way in which we live in Europe for many years. And regulation definitely had a role to play. So what you mentioned, privacy, the GDPR, human rights, all these concepts might not be used on a regular basis by all EU citizens, but certainly in a way they shaped the understanding of reality and also in human interaction. So it's just, I think, the question of bringing to the surface really what we're talking about and how we understand each other. So hopefully this project will help remembering, recalling for everyone
If I
what
may,
are these common understandings.
I would just add one thing, because we were now talking a lot about legislation, so hard law, let's say. I just wrote a small op-ed or small essay, kind of second type of Brussels effect. So basically exporting our rules. And what I'm saying, we should also focus much more on exporting our governance approaches, because it's not only, let's say, now the AI Act that we want to be replicated in, as you said, our neighborhood countries like Morocco and so on.
Of course.
But especially if we think about AI, there are a lot of governance tools that we are currently developing in the European Union. For example, incident notification, how technical documentation is being done, but also closer to your project, how, for example, certain democratic societal risks could be dealt with if you are thinking about human oversight and so on and so on. In general, documentation, recording. And there I would see already, and this is also what I'm arguing for in my article, while countries, for example, in Northern Africa, might not be interested in taking over the whole AI Act, they are, however, quite interested in taking over certain aspects of AI governance, of certain best practices. Also think about the solar industry in Northern Africa, how AI can be used if you want to save energy, distribute it smarter, how networks can work together better, and so on. And here the EU has a lot to explain, to show. And again, if we manage to also bring there the ideas of our citizens in, and also send them abroad and also learn from the feedback from other countries, I think we could all benefit a lot. And I find it a really nice idea in this time of, how I call it, realism. So realism is back in geopolitics, and I find this is a nice pushback a little bit. So on a much more technical level, to cooperate.
And I think these are very valuable points because, as you rightly say, there are some legal design principles that could be deployed in different ways, but maybe not all of them. Some of them could be interesting
Exactly.
for other jurisdictions, but not all of them. So also the question, of course, of how the EU can shape the discussion around digital power and regulation more broadly on an international level. So we're coming close to the end. But before we leave and close the podcast, Kai, I wanted to ask you something related to the social contract, to the EU social contract in particular, because in a way, what we have discussed and your overview, your very detailed and rich overview on what is happening on the ground with the digital omnibus proposal is really telling from the perspective of how the EU might be shifting its position from the perspective of digital regulation. In the reports that I have prepared, I have identified different elements of the EU social contract, and two of them are shared values, but also shared objectives, right? On the one hand, we have the values. So in a way, the common principles that underpin the action of the EU and that unifies, that give a common homogeneous vision of what the EU should do. And of course, I mean, they're very high level, and sometimes, it happens as well that you might not respect them, but of course, they should be the lighthouse, the guiding light for the EU action. And on the other hand, we also have the objectives. So what do you want to achieve with its existence, with its institutional apparatus and its rules? So something that I've discussed in the report is an interesting phenomenon where we see almost that digitization, so expanding digital power and digital technology, is almost becoming a primary objective of the EU. If we look at newspapers, but also political declarations and discussions, digitization is everywhere. So expanding the power of the EU through digital technologies, almost unleashing these dormant forces that have been somehow left at their own devices for years. But what this seems to be creating from the perspective of the broader EU social contract is also a tension with EU values. So think about precisely the rule of law, think about equality of everyone before the law, and how instead digitization, as we know, can impact, for instance, inequalities in society, protection of human rights, thinking about privacy. So would you agree in a way that digitization, if pursued to the extent that it's becoming also part of almost the identity of the EU, as shaping the objectives of the EU, could lead to an erosion of EU values, and therefore also the rules that underpin the in a way the agreement that binds each other in the EU?
Yeah, no, I definitely see this risk. And just to give one example that is not really 100% the same, but I think shows a very similar development, is how many companies currently are wishing to invest and to deploy AI, even though they don't really know what is AI actually. But yeah, it's a buzzword. Everyone wants to do it, and therefore they are now also telling their staff, okay, from now on you need to use Gen AI because my CEO colleagues all think it's super important and will change everything. And definitely politics and in general our society, our system is at risk, at least, to fall for the same. that digitalization in itself, as you nicely said, becomes our key objective. We want to create more and more digital tools. We want to bring robotics more and more in our also personal life. But then the question comes, for what? Is it really an advantage? Are we really benefiting from it? Is it really safer? And so on and so on. Those questions in particular right now, and I was talking quite lengthy about it in this super polarized times where the EU economy is declining, where many business leaders, but also policy leaders have this feeling we need to act, we need to do something now. Probably it's an perceived easy way out to just digitize, to just invest a lot without really knowing in which direction we want to go. And this point I also made already before. I think the opposite is true. We should know exactly what we want to do. We should have a game plan, a clear vision, a kind of ideology, because this will in the end create much better output, a much better outcome, because I saw it in my personal life all the time. If I know exactly where I want to go to, then I achieved a good result. If I'm just doing something, either I didn't manage a result at all, or it was not really what in the end would have been best. But going back to your project and going back to, let's say, this community of rational and centrist people that I would say both of us belong to, I think it's now on us to show that everything thinks about economy, about costs, and so on. We need to make clear that a value-based form of digitalization is not creating more costs. It's saving costs. It's the best strategy that we can take. And it also doesn't mean that we are not allowed to simplify, going back to our first topic, or to even deregulate in certain areas. This is not what I would at least say. Again, there are a lot of legal problems with the current digital framework, but to remove the whole framework now in absolute terms, or to remove all of our principles, is similarly crazy. Again, it's a middle ground. We should improve. We should maybe remove certain parts. We should add certain parts and merge a lot of things. But the principles that we have developed over so many years is a treasure that we should build up on. But yeah, again, I think it's really on us, on our community, to make this point very, very clearly, because in times like now, and also with all the geopolitical, let's call it, events that we are currently observing, it's of course extremely difficult to go for a rational, pragmatic way. Policymakers are deciding for the opposite. No? So yeah, let's hope for the best.
Well, I have two takeaways from you, what you just shared with us, Kai. On the one hand, doubling down on values. I think I really like this idea of not forgetting what we've built up to this point, in the sense that we don't have to dismantle it suddenly to facilitate digitization and at all costs, right? Without a clear direction, without knowing who will benefit from it and how this will impact us in the long term. And then second, I also really liked what you just said, thinking about, reminding everyone what we are in the European Union from the perspective of protection, and thinking that, once again, the economic dimension of certain phenomena should also be carefully studied. And this is where the role, I think, of researchers and academics can come in to bring nuance, right, to this very emotionally loaded type of politics that swings from one extreme to the other, while sometimes compromise and finding the middle ground is probably the best strategy also for the long term. So, Kai, this was brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and reflections with us on a very complex topic, that of EU digital regulation and how it can shape and is shaping the EU social contract. So thank you very much for your time and for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Rethink the Deal. We hope our insights on the challenges facing the EU social contract inspire you to join the debate. To ensure you never miss our next discussion, please subscribe and follow the Express2 project online. This podcast series is part of the Express2 research project, funded by the Horizon Europe program.